What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name is Jose Ramos Jr. And when it comes to these episodes of the podcast, I try to have an overarching theme that really ties up together what's going on, especially within the WWE or in pro wrestling. And it seems that one of the biggest or most notable themes right now is family. You see, family, although you're not able to choose your family members, a lot of times those that you're connected with, those that you are super close with, can become your family members. And ultimately, the way you interact with one another and bounce off of each other, that can dictate your relationship with the world. And that influence, that level of importance that you have with that familial relationship can ultimately morph you into the person that you're going to be. And this past week on Monday Night Raw, we saw two instances of major familial impact. Of course, in the WWE, there's so many aspects of family, especially with the factions nowadays becoming more relevant, becoming more prominent on WWE TV. But I'll start with this. You look at the Judgment Day. The state of the Judgment Day is in real peril, I think. Although Finn Balor and JD McDonough were successful in winning the World Tag Team Championships away from R-Truth and The Miz, that inclusion of Liv Morgan, her becoming more active in the daily operations of the Judgment Day, is becoming very apparent. It's becoming very dangerous. You can see that look on Damian Priest's face whenever he sees Liv Morgan interacting with his boys, or even to the point that she was in their locker room. And then, speaking of Damian Priest, how about that promo with Seth Rollins? Seth Rollins coming out addressing Damian Priest and how his claim of being the real world champion, that Seth Rollins couldn't hold the title. And then doubling down on the challenge. He says, Seth Rollins, if I can't beat you at Money in the Bank, then I can no longer challenge you for that world title. Of course, Damian Priest loves that idea. Why, who wouldn't? One less person to worry about. But if Seth Rollins were to come out victorious, then Damian Priest is no longer a member of the Judgment Day. Damian Priest, if anyone is in his position, of course they're going to have that sense of confidence. He's el campeón. He's the champ. There's no reason for him not to be confident. And we've seen week in and week out, he's told the Judgment Day, do not interfere in my matches. I got this. And just like at Backlash, for example, they interfered. I look at it this way. Damian Priest can have all the confidence in the world, but the moment you start saying things like, the Judgment Day needs me more than I need the Judgment Day, then you're already checked out. We're at this point in the Judgment Day where Rhea Ripley obviously is dealing with an injury, hasn't been seen or heard from since WrestleMania. Dominik is going off with Liv Morgan, and I'll get to that in a moment. JD and Finn are probably the more consistent members of the Judgment Day, and JD's not even technically a member. He's just by association. Carlito's trying to get in. And then there's Damian Priest, who's clearly the world champion. He's clearly, put on a pedestal, positioned to be the top dog in the Judgment Day. But when you say comments like that, that leads me to believe that we might be approaching the end. And it's felt like that for quite some time, ever since the whole Liv Morgan storyline began. But now we're just inching closer and closer. I believe Damian Priest will come out victorious against Seth Rollins. I don't see him leaving the Judgment Day just now. In fact, I think he holds it until SummerSlam. I think Gunther is the one that will actually be the one to dethrone Damian Priest. But the Judgment Day, the state of the Judgment Day, is something to keep an eye on. And we saw reports that, late last year, that the Judgment Day was going to be taken seriously. And they were going to treat it like the bloodline for Raw. And we've seen little bits and pieces of advancement and story and how they've evolved over time. And they've really handled it well, I thought. Over the course of 2023, I think some could argue that the Judgment Day became a little stagnant. It became a little repetitive and redundant. But in 2024, again, you mentioned Damian Priest winning the world title. You mentioned JD and Finn, the inclusion of Carlito, Liv Morgan and Dominik. It's a lot of compelling stuff being told. And when I go to the Liv Morgan and Dominik Mysterio stuff, every week, that is something I'm looking forward to. Because it's something different, right? It's something we haven't seen in quite some time. I know some people might frown upon the whole love angle or relationship angle, but this isn't just like any angle. We all know that Dominik, supposedly loyal to mommy, Rhea Ripley, and although he's not entirely entertaining this interest from Liv Morgan, who we don't even know is if she's genuinely interested or if it's all just a ploy. But you look at the interaction in the ring. So Liv Morgan's in the ring and she wants to call out Dominik Mysterio because of the gifts that he received from her. But instead, Zelina Vega, who's establishing a little feud with Liv Morgan for this world title, comes out. And she wants a shot at the title. She doesn't care about this whole Dominik Mysterio aspect with Liv Morgan. And in the midst of it all, before things get a little too heated, Dominik finally emerges from the back. And by the way, Dominik Mysterio, these gifts in question, we're talking about a PlayStation 5. He had a tray full of chicken nuggets. And of course, unseen text messages that we didn't see as an audience, but we'll leave that up to the imagination of the mind. He gets into the ring. And he tells Zelina Vega, I know you and I don't see eye to eye. I know you've had your problems with Rhea. And then she's associated, of course, with Rey Mysterio, his father. He has his beef with him. But he said, I would rather see anyone as world champion than Liv Morgan. And of course, over time, this leads to a little fight. Liv Morgan and Zelina get in a fight. Rey Mysterio emerges from the back, pulls Liv Morgan off, to separate the two, and then turns around and Dominik gives him such a shove. It gave me a pop. I thought they made Dominik look strong as hell the way he pushed Rey Mysterio. So I thought that was very interesting. And initially I thought, is there a possibility that we'll see a mixed tag? Perhaps. But obviously it's announced for next Monday night. We're going to have Rey versus Dominik. Zelina gets her title shot against Liv Morgan. And then on top of this, after Dominik shoves Rey Mysterio, he goes to the back, but you could see Liv Morgan following him. And you can already tell. She's looking at him as like a conquering hero, like you saved me and all of that. And Dominik doesn't want any part of it. He just did it because he doesn't like the LWO. He doesn't like Rey Mysterio. Nothing more, nothing less. Until Liv Morgan has an idea. She sees our truth and she manages to convince him to give JD and Finn a shot at the title. And of course, this leads to the main event, as I mentioned prior, that Finn and JD would win the world title, which I think was needed. I like the Miz. I like the R-Truth team that they had. But once they won the tag titles, they didn't really. I feel like they didn't really capitalize on it. It got to the point where I was just looking forward to who was going to be the new champs, and I think it's smart to get the titles on a team that is very active on Raw, someone that fans are looking forward to in their progression of storylines. Not to say that the Miz and R-Truth aren't. It's just we know the Judgment Day is more compelling TV right now. So it was fun while it lasted, but now we look at Finn and JD, who seemingly have accepted Liv Morgan, not only because they got a tag team title shot because of her, but also because she basically helped them win the match. And you saw at the end of Monday Night Raw, prior to it going off the air, they're on the ramp celebrating with Liv Morgan. They look back and they just give a little shrug, like, well, I guess she's one of us for now. So that's always been an interesting aspect when it comes to factions or families, as I mentioned, is when you have these outside individuals coming in. You're very hesitant to invite them because you're used to your status quo. You're used to the way that things are. You don't want change. People tend to not like change. They fear it. So now that we have Liv Morgan coming in, and keep that in mind, it's a track record with the Judgment Day. When JD was there was hesitation. R-Truth, hesitation. Carlito, hesitation. And now we're at Liv Morgan, and naturally there's hesitation. So at least they're consistent, and at least they're keeping up with their word in terms of storytelling of how the Judgment Day has been in terms of new members. And I don't think Liv Morgan's ever going to be a full member. She might be an associate. And even then, I think that won't happen as well. I think she's solely there for Dominik. I don't see it progressing into her becoming a member of the Judgment Day. But real compelling stuff. I'm a fan of what they're doing with Judgment Day. But what I really took away from Monday Night Raw was the Uncle Howdy segment. That in itself, I found very interesting. But I'll start from the top. Obviously, we saw the debut of the Wyatt Six on last week's episode of Monday Night Raw, which, again, I go back and I say it was one of the best debuts that I've seen in quite some time, especially given the production level, the production value, the way it was executed, the way it was shot. I thought it was top notch. I was a fan of it, and I look forward to seeing more aspects of this group and what they can do with it. But throughout the week, for example, on Pat McAfee's show, they had shown little hints of what appeared to be like an Uncle Howdy or Wyatt Six kind of takeover with the lights shutting off. At one point, Triple H was on the program, and they had the phrase "you lied" pop up. So you obviously know there's some kind of intent there. And ironically enough, Pat McAfee was not present on this episode of Monday Night Raw. So don't know if that has anything to do with it. But Chad Gable, who is seemingly another target of the Wyatt Six. And ironically enough, look what happened. Chad Gable, a mentor, a teacher to those in the Alpha Academy, and the way he's mistreated them, the way he's basically emotionally, verbally, abused them. And that's not to say that they can ever not, that they won't reconcile. I don't know. But ironically enough, the same episode that they decided to leave him was when the Wyatt Six attack Chad Gable. So now he's on edge, and I love the extra presence of security around. It really makes it feel like there's something, some sort of threat around the locker room, around the arena. And you saw Chad Gable arrive, kind of covering his face from the camera. They really treated it like it was some form of paparazzi looking for a scoop or something. I think the only thing they were missing was maybe like a Kathy Kelly wanting to get questions. Obviously, they did that later outside of his locker room, but I'm talking about out in the parking area where he entered the arena. As we talk about the Wyatt Six, because I got off on a tangent there with Chad Gable. Abby the Witch. But she hasn't really received a name yet, but obviously that's the connotation we take her for. She enters the ring after Chad Gable had won his qualifying triple threat match. Chases Chad Gable off. And keep in mind, the ring is now filled with smoke. The lights are out. Very similar to how they entered the arena last week. And she heads over to the announce table where she has a box that she hands to Michael Cole. We would then come to find out that the box had a VHS tape, which Michael Cole had to explain to our younger viewers what a VHS tape was, that said, "Play me." And if anybody knows of the franchise Saw, anytime you have a tape that says "Play me," it's never a good thing. And also, I like the aspect that he had to hand it to somebody like on the production, so they can run up to Gorilla or the production truck, so they can play it for the broadcast. And what followed, I thought, was very much similar to the '97 interview from Monday Night Raw when it was Jim Ross and Mick Foley. And we really got to know the character of Mick Foley. He talked about his upbringing. He talked about the inception of the Mankind gimmick. We got to know more about the man, and we became invested in it. I didn't think off of week 2 that we were going to be introduced to Bo Dallas or Taylor Rotunda. A lot of people are saying that this was Taylor talking and not Bo because it was just so real. But to see him in the same room as Uncle Howdy, and obviously the way they did it was a split screen where you can see that Bo Dallas, or Taylor, as I mentioned, is sitting across from Uncle Howdy, and he's asking him questions. And we really got to see an emotional side of Taylor. He was asked the question by Uncle Howdy, how did it feel when your brother died? And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, wow, like that's one of the first questions they asked him, and I did not expect that. That's a very hard-hitting question, and I feel like we got a real answer from Taylor Rotunda, from Bo Dallas, because He says that all he wanted to be was his brother. He wanted to be like his brother. He looked up to him. And then Uncle Howdy seemingly asks him that doing this, is it not a way of like exploiting Bray Wyatt? Which is a fair question, and I'm glad that they are asking this question and presenting it in front of the audience, because these are real questions that people are asking. Is this an exploitation of Bray Wyatt? People criticize the whole Rey Mysterio run in 2006 because they thought it was exploiting the death of Eddie Guerrero. So it's a valid question. I get it. I totally understand it. So for them to address it head on, week 2, I think was a bold choice, but I think it probably was the smart choice. You want to get it out of the air and just address it. The segment continues, and we get, like I said, a real in-depth feel for what was going on in the mind of Taylor Rotunda / Bo Dallas. He says that people forgot them, but now we're going to make them remember. And as the segment begins to close, the camera shot changes to where it's a split screen. We have Uncle Howdy on the right, we have Bo Dallas on the left side, and the lights begin to flash, or like a filter begins to flash, and we reveal that these two are actually in the room that the Firefly Funhouse had taken place in, had been filmed in. You know, the room that Bray Wyatt spent a lot of his time in during those later years of his run in the WWE. At this point right now, like I said, the overall theme has been family. You can't choose them. But in this case, with the Wyatt Six, they were selected. They were saved. That's what it seems like to me. Each individual had their own family. We covered that in a previous video, the full explanation of the Wyatt Six. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. And we look at it in the sense of it's a group of these exiled misfits who have no family. They have no friends. They have no allegiances. Dexter Lumis with The Way. Nikki Cross with Sanity. Eric Rowan was one of the first members of the Wyatt family. Joe Gacy had the Schism. And Bo Dallas literally lost a member of his own family. Come together in one single unit. And granted, we only saw Abby the Witch this week. So who are we going to see next week? Maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's what they do starting next week, is one individual at a time. You don't have to see everyone at once, but to maintain that presence that we're always here. Is it something they do? I don't know. But it is something to look forward to. Monday Night Raw has been on quite the roll. And the level of storytelling, the level of execution that they've been pulling off, I think is second to none. I think right now we're in the midst of one of the best runs they've had in a long time. I mean, you saw, I'm sure, on the internet, on Twitter, photos were circulating about how 5 years ago in 2019, it was stomping grounds. It was practically an empty arena. They struggled to fill up these arenas. Fast forward 5 years later, and we had a streak of, what was it, maybe 18 shows in a row, sellout after sellout. You look at the main events, the pay-per-view / PLEs, depending what you want to call them, and it's a sellout. They're getting these big crowds. They're being able to go to places like Perth, Australia. They're able to go to places like Puerto Rico, to France. Obviously, they have their contract with Saudi Arabia. We're preparing to go to Canada next for Money in the Bank. There's much more of a worldwide appeal and representation when it comes to the product, and I think that's for the better. You don't want to be secluded to just one country, the US, although it's probably one of the best businesses that they can get out of. But to get that reaction from these different audiences from different countries, that only encourages the WWE to want to keep coming back. And speaking of audiences, Indianapolis, who was the crowd for Monday Night Raw, recently it was announced that they are going to get a WrestleMania, they're going to get a SummerSlam, and a Royal Rumble, this upcoming Royal Rumble in 2025. I think they might have sold me, because I thought it was a good crowd for Monday Night Raw. Very active, very included with the program. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they'll do there, especially because it's in Lucas Oil Stadium, which is a nice stadium. It's a big stadium. And speaking of which, Royal Rumble, a lot of people have been talking about how it's going to be taking place February 1st, which is the first time the Royal Rumble will ever take place outside of January. Granted, we've had Royal Rumbles take place in January 30th and 31st, right towards the end of the month. But to have it on February 1st, I think is a very interesting choice. We're so used to it being in January. Like, for example, if my math isn't wrong, what would it have been? The January 25th, if they were to keep it. For some reason, it's on February 1st. I haven't really checked out the NFL schedule. I don't know if that's due to the way they scheduled their NFC championships or the playoffs in general, because I know that that's factored into it as well. They try to put it in that bye week where the Pro Bowl typically takes place. I don't know. It's like I said, not too far off, but a lot of these events are getting pushed back. Look at WrestleMania. WrestleMania, typically last week of March, first weekend of April, and this year it's going to be April 19th, April 20th. A nice little birthday gift for me. Don't get me wrong, but it's like they're pushing it back. I don't know if it has anything to do with scheduling, but in the sense of stories, maybe it's needed because you're giving them that opportunity to really dive into these stories and not hot shot these matches. Because that's the last thing you want. I think WWE right now, what they're doing well is developing stories and getting us invested in these characters so that when it comes to the match, now we're invested, because you can have a great match. And this is when the comparison to AEW comes. You can have a great match, but I feel like that extra additive storytelling really makes a difference. And that's not a shot at AEW. I think AEW is doing fine for what it's wanting to present. But I feel like that's an aspect that they're missing. They do have stories. I will give them credit. I think the Hangman Adam Page story, his evolution from when he was, the drunken cowboy all the way to beating Kenny Omega. There's a bunch of stories that they've told over the course of the years that have been great. MJF versus CM Punk is it's probably my favorite AEW storyline. So they have done it. I just feel like WWE does it on a more consistent basis. That's all. And in time, they're still a really young company. It's only been 5 years. They'll learn. They'll figure it out, I'm sure. Maybe they'll have to get a different style in terms of booking. I know Tony Khan is the lead booker. Who knows? Maybe that'll change. I'm not saying he'll be not the lead booker, but maybe he'll have more of a team around him. I mean, time will tell. They're still a young company. I'm hoping they'll be here for years to come, because I do think that competition is key. I think if you're not having someone who's able to push you to be better, you're not. You might stay stagnant. Look at the WWE for the last 20 years. Without competition, a viable competition, that is, they became stagnant. They became stale in a lot of people's eyes. So I think it's a great thing that we have people like TNA, like we have New Japan, like I mentioned, AEW out there to kind of push them. And as well, it's great for the business. It's great for the wrestlers to have those opportunities elsewhere. If it doesn't work out in WWE, or if you want to hone your craft in other companies prior to heading to WWE, then you have that at your disposal. I think we're in such a great spot when it comes to pro wrestling, which is what really inspired me to begin this journey with you guys, this podcast, this channel. I'm having fun with it. I'm glad that you guys are having fun with it. And that brings me to this. I forgot to mention, at the time of recording here, we have crossed the 1,000 subs threshold. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. I love the participation. I love the activity and the support that you guys have given this podcast. Let's continue to grow it. That way we can become bigger and better. I'm looking forward to what else we can bring. But please, guys, comment down below what you thought of this episode of Monday Night Raw. What was your takeaway from the Uncle Howdy segment? How do we think the Judgment Day progresses now that they added the tag team titles to the group? What did we think overall about Monday Night Raw? There's a lot of aspects I didn't get to talk about because I really wanted to hone in on that aspect of the factions, of the family, the Wyatts, and the Judgment Day. Very eventful Monday Night Raw. I'm looking forward to what we see on Friday Night SmackDown. Again, thank you guys for joining me on this episode of the J Area Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep up to date with all the pro wrestling content that is produced on this channel. Keep up with the J Area Podcast, and I will see you guys on the next episode.